I stood at the altar, my heart pounding against the delicate lace of my wedding dress. I had just poured out 5 years of love in 700 carefully chosen words. I looked at my husband, Liam, waiting for him to do the same. He just smirked and said, "Yeah." What she said, that wasn't just laziness. It was the first shot in a war. I didn't even know he was fighting. This is a story about how the most important promise can be a lie. If you've ever felt small in a big moment, hit that subscribe button, because you'll want to see how this ends. The final stitch on my wedding dress felt less like a closure and more like the opening of a lock. It was a simple pearl button at the cuff, the last of 50 that ran from my wrist to my shoulder. My mom, her eyes misty, had spent the better part of an hour fastening them. Now, alone in the bridal suite, I stood before the full-length mirror, turning my arm in the soft morning light that filtered through the hotel's towering windows. The scent of lilies, thousands of them lining the chapel downstairs. It was so thick I could almost taste it on my tongue. It was the smell of a fresh start. On the small, ornate desk beside the window lay 2 cream-colored cards, my handwriting flowing across them in careful silver ink. I picked them up, the thick cardstock feeling heavy and substantial in my hands. Me vows? 712 words that had taken me 3 months to perfect. I read the last line one more time, my voice a whisper in the quiet room. And so today, I choose to leave the past behind us and build a new, unbreakable truth with you. Starting now. That single line held the weight of 5 years. It made me think of the night he'd proposed 2 years ago. Liam wasn't a man of grand pronouncements. He'd done it on a Tuesday, in our small apartment kitchen, while I was trying to salvage a curry I'd let burn. There were no fireworks, no hidden photographers, just him, on one knee, holding out a simple velvet box. He hadn't said much then, either. Just, "Chloe, I know I'm not great with words, but my life is better with you in it. Will you marry me?" His actions had always been his language. He'd remembered a passing comment I'd made a year earlier about a specific cut of diamond. He'd chilled the exact bottle of Sauvignon Blanc we'd shared on our first date. I'd believed those actions were enough. I'd believed they were his vows, spoken in a language of quiet effort. That belief had started to fray just last night. The city lights of Austin twinkled below our hotel window, a blanket of distant stars. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, running a polishing cloth over my wedding jewelry, while Liam was stretched out on the sofa, scrolling through something on his phone, the blue light flickering across his face. The muffled sounds of a basketball game filled the space between us. "Hey, honey," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Are you all set with your vows for tomorrow?" He didn't look up from the screen. Oh. Yeah. Don't worry about it." "You're not nervous about reading them," I pressed gently. He finally glanced over, a flicker of something annoyance, maybe in his eyes. "Babe, I'm not a writer like you. I'm not gonna stand up there with a bunch of note cards. I'll just, say what feels right in the moment." He turned back to his phone, but I couldn't let it go. A cold little knot was forming in the pit of my stomach. But we talked about it. I thought we agreed we'd write them. It's important to me. He sighed, a heavy, put-upon sound. "And we're getting married? That's the important part. Isn't it my being there? Putting a ring on your finger? That's what matters. Not some flowery speech." He tossed his phone onto the cushion beside him and stood up. "I'm gonna grab a shower. Don't stay up too late worrying about it. It'll be fine." I listened to the hiss of the shower, the knot in my stomach tightening. I told myself he was just nervous. I told myself he was right, that his actions were what mattered. I repeated it like a mantra until I almost believed it again. The next day, everything was perfect. The music, the flowers, the way the afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows of the chapel, painting the aisle in jewels of light. As I walked toward him, my dad's arm linked through mine. I saw only Liam. He stood waiting for me, looking impossibly handsome in his tailored suit. A small, reassuring smile on his face. The knot in my stomach dissolved. He was here. He was smiling. Everything was going to be okay. When the time came, I turned to him, my hands trembling slightly as I unfolded my vow cards. I took a shaky breath and began to speak, my voice filling the hushed chapel. I poured all 5 years of our history, all my hopes for our future, into those words. I spoke of his steadiness, of his quiet strength, and I ended with my promise to leave the past behind and build our new truth together. When I finished, my vision was blurry with tears. I looked at him, my heart wide open, waiting. The officiant smiled. And now, Liam, your vows to Chloe. Liam cleared his throat. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He looked at me, then briefly out at our guests, then down at his own shoes. Wow, he began, a small, awkward laugh escaping his lips. That's a tough act to follow. A few people chuckled politely. I kept my smile fixed in place, my heart starting to beat a little too fast. Yeah. Chloe, she's just the best. An amazing person. I'm a very lucky guy. He paused, looking at me as if searching for a cue. I just stared back, my smile starting to feel like a mask cracking at the edges. And, well, yeah, what she said. He shrugged. A small, almost imperceptible gesture, and then turned back to the officiant. I'm good. Silence. It wasn't a reverent silence. It was a thick, heavy, suffocating blanket of confusion. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a prickling sensation behind my eyes. The officiant, a seasoned professional, barely missed a beat. But I saw the flicker of shock in his eyes before he quickly moved on with the ceremony. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my best friend and maid of honor, Jessica. Her mouth was slightly open, her expression a mixture of disbelief and fury on my behalf. A few rows back, I saw Liam's mother. She wasn't looking at me with pity. She was looking at me with a tight-lipped expression of annoyance. As if my visible disappointment was a breach of etiquette, the heat in my face intensified, blooming into a full-body flush of humiliation. It felt like I was standing alone on a stage, a spotlight revealing me as a fool who had mistaken a one-act play for a lifelong commitment. The rest of the ceremony was a blur. I said I do on autopilot. I felt the cold weight of the ring slide onto my finger. When he leaned in to kiss me, his lips were dry and brief. At the reception, the noise of the band and the laughter of our guests felt 100 miles away. I was moving through a dream, smiling for photos, accepting hugs. But my mind was stuck on that moment at the altar. After we cut the cake, I saw my chance. I grabbed Liam's arm, my fingers digging into the fine wool of his suit jacket. We need to talk, I hissed, pulling him toward a small alcove near the restrooms. Whoa. What's going on? He asked, his voice laced with irritation. What's going on, Liam? What was that at the altar? What she said, that's all you had? He rolled his eyes. Actually rolled his eyes at me on our wedding day. Oh. Come on. Chloe. You're not seriously going to start this now. Are you? It's a party. Our party. Everyone is having a great time. You're overreacting. Overreacting, I poured my heart out to you in front of everyone we love. And you dismissed it like it was nothing. You made me look like a pathetic, desperate idiot. Nobody thinks that, he said, his voice dropping to a low, warning tone. You're the only one making a big deal out of this. Now are we going to go back out there and enjoy the night that we spent a fortune on? Or are you going to hide in a hallway and ruin it? He didn't wait for an answer. Just smoothed down his jacket and walked back into the ballroom, leaving me standing in the dim light, my entire body trembling. Later, I escaped to the bridal suite to touch up my makeup, which was a lie. I just needed to breathe in a room where no one was looking at me. I was staring at my reflection, a bride with haunted eyes. When the door opened, it was Jessica. She didn't say anything at first, just came over and put her arms around me. That was not okay, she said softly, her voice fierce. What he did up there was cruel. You looked like you were standing there all alone. Chloe, you don't deserve that. Hearing her say it, hearing my own raw feelings validated, was the only thing that kept the tears from falling. It was a confirmation that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't just overreacting. Somehow, I made it through the rest of the night. We danced. We smiled. We waved goodbye as we drove off to the lavish downtown hotel where we were spending our wedding night. But the moment the suite door closed behind us, the silence was deafening. There was no romantic carrying over the threshold. No champagne toast. I went into the bathroom to take off my dress, the 50 pearl buttons now feeling like the bars of a cage. When I came out, wearing one of the silk robes the hotel provided, Liam was already out on the balcony, his back to me, talking on his phone. The glass door was ajar, and his voice drifted in on the cool night air. It was low, but I could make out the words. No. Man. It was a great party, he was saying. I assumed he was talking to his brother, the best man. There was a pause. Yeah. She's a little upset about something. It's stupid. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Liam sighed. Look. She's just being sensitiva. You know how she gets? Especially after that whole thing. She always needs a little extra reassurance. She always needs a little extra reassurance. The words floated through the open balcony door, sharp and cold as ice chips against my bare skin. That whole thing? He didn't have to name it. After 5 years, it was a ghost that lived in our silences, a shadow that fell between us in our most intimate moments. My infidelity. In the first year we were together. A stupid, drunken mistake that I had confessed through a flood of shameful tears, and that he had promised. He had forgiven. My hand tightened on the doorframe. The luxurious silk of the hotel robe felt suddenly thin and useless against a chill that was coming from deep inside me. He was discussing my deepest shame with his brother on our wedding night, packaging it as a tiresome personality quirk he had to manage. She always needs a little extra reassurance. Like I was a nervous pet. Not his wife. He came back inside a moment later, sliding the glass door shut with a soft click. He had a self-satisfied look on his face, the kind he got after winning an argument or closing a deal at work. He didn't seem to notice the way I was standing, rigid as a statue, by the entryway to the bedroom, That was Mark, he said, unbuttoning his cuffs. Just wanted to say congrats again. He smiled at me. A lacy, confident smile. Ready to call it a night? Mrs. Miller. The name, my new name, felt foreign and heavy on my shoulders. I just nodded, unable to trust my voice. I watched him move around the opulent suite, oblivious. The entire night, the entire day, had been an elaborate piece of theater, and I was the only one who hadn't been given a script. Our honeymoon in Cancun was supposed to be the remedy. 2 weeks of white sand, turquoise water, and overpriced cocktails. A forced reset. But the ghost came with us, packing itself into Liam's suitcase alongside his linen shirts and sunglasses. It sat between us on the beach chairs while I tried to read, and he scrolled endlessly through his phone. It swam in the crystalline water between our bodies, a cold current in the tropical warmth. Every attempt I made to bridge the distance was met with a wall of passive indifference. I'd suggest a snorkeling trip, and he'd say his shoulders were burned. I'd try to start a conversation about our future, and he'd give one-word answers, his eyes fixed on the horizon. On the third day, I tried again. We were having lunch at a little thatched roof restaurant overlooking the ocean. The air smelled of salt and grilled fish. It's so beautiful here, I said, hoping to break the thick silence. It's fine, he said, not looking up from his menu. I put my fork down, the sound clattering loudly on the ceramic plate. Liam, please, talk to me. Things feel off. Ever since the wedding. He let out a long, slow sigh. The kind that was engineered to make me feel small and demanding. Chloe, I'm on vacation. We're on our honeymoon. Can we please just enjoy it? I really don't want to rehash this again. Rehash it. We never hashed it in the first place. You refused to talk about it. My voice was starting to tremble, and I hated it. You refused to talk about how you made me feel. And how is that? He asked, his tone dangerously calm. How did I make you feel? Like I was alone. Like I was a fool. Like my feelings, my effort, meant absolutely nothing to you. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. He looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time all day, his eyes were flat, devoid of the warmth I had once mistaken for love. You're choosing to feel that way, he said. I'm here. I'm sitting on a beach with you. What more do you want? Why can't you just be happy? You're ruining this trip. You know, obsessing over a few words when you should be grateful for all of this. He gestured vaguely at the ocean, at the perfect sky. I felt the familiar sting of tears and blinked them back furiously. He was right. I was ruining it. Maybe I was just broken. Too sensitive. Expecting a movie script, romance from a man who had always been pragmatic. I picked up my fork and took a bite of my salad. It tasted like ashes. The next afternoon, the final nail was hammered in by his mother. We were by the pool when his phone rang. He answered. Then after a minute, he held it out to me. It's my mom. She wants to say hi. I took the phone, pasting a bright smile on my face. Hi. Eleanor, how are you? Oh. I'm fine. Dear. She said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Just wanted to check in. Liam tells me you're still a bit down in the dumps about the wedding. My smile faltered. Oh. Well? I was just a little disappointed. But now, Chloe, she cut in. her tone shifting to one of a patient teacher explaining a simple concept to a difficult child. You have to understand men. Especially my Liam. He's a man of action. Not words. He shows his love by being there. You can't expect him to be some kind of poet. It's not fair to him. A good wife knows how to appreciate her husband for who he is, not for who she wishes he was. I felt my blood run cold. I was being coached on how to be a better wife, how to properly manage my expectations of her son, who was sitting right next to me, listening to every word. I mumbled a few pleasantries and handed the phone back to Liam. He took it without meeting my eyes. I stood up, walked to the edge of the pool, and dove in. The shock of the cold water, a welcome distraction from the humiliation burning under my skin. The breaking point came on our last night. Liam had booked us a table at the resort's most exclusive restaurant. A place with white tablecloths, hushed waiters, and a view of the moonlit sea. It felt less like a romantic gesture and more like a final, performative act before the curtain fell on this disastrous trip. We sat in near total silence. The clinking of silverware the only sound between us. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to try one last time. I know you think I'm overreacting. I began, my voice barely a whisper. And maybe I am. But all I ever wanted, Liam, was to feel truly chosen by you on our wedding day. To hear you say, in your own words, why you were choosing me. He stared at me for a long moment. A strange expression on his face. He put down his wine glass and leaned forward, his voice low and venomous. Chosen, he said, the word dripping with contempt. You wanted to feel chosen after what you did to me. You really think you have the right to demand poetry and promises after that? The air left my lungs in a rush. The ghost was no longer a shadow. It was sitting at the table with us. And Liam was holding its hand. You cheated on me, Chloe, he hissed, his eyes boring into mine. Did you forget that? Did you think that just because I agreed to marry you, it all just disappeared? I stayed with you. I put a ring on your finger. I gave you this wedding. This life. What more do you possibly think you are entitled to? And then, I understood. Everything clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening clarity. The 5 years of his forgiveness. The constant sople dice. The way he would bring it up in arguments. A trump card he always held in reserve. His refusal to write vows wasn't laziness or a lack of romantic flair. It was a statement. It was a public punishment. Delivered on the biggest stage of my life. He had stood before our friends and family and silently declared that I was not worthy of his words. That I was lucky to even be there. My marriage wasn't a partnership. It was a life sentence. With him as the warden. The sadness I had been drowning in for days evaporated. Replaced by a glacial rage. It was so pure. So cold. It felt like a superpower. For the first time, I saw him clearly. Not as the quiet, steady man I thought I loved, but as a cruel, patient manipulator who had been slowly bleeding me of my self-worth for half a decade. My justice wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be screaming matches or throwing plates. My justice would be a quiet, meticulous extraction. I would leave him, but not as a heartbroken victim fleeing in the night. I would leave on my own terms, armed with the truth. The flight home was silent. When we walked back into our house, the air was stale and heavy with unspoken truths. Liam, believing he had finally put me in my place, went back to his routine as if nothing had happened. That first evening back, while he was on a long conference call in his home office, I went to mine. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. my hands shaking as I opened my old laptop. I started searching through archived emails from 5 years ago. The weeks after my confession, it took me almost an hour. My breath held tight in my chest. And then, I found it. An email from him. Sent a week after I had told him everything. I had forgotten it completely. Buried it under the weight of my own guilt and his supposed forgiveness. I opened it. My eyes scanned the lines of text until they landed on the final paragraph. I don't know if I can get over this. Chloe, I love you. But I don't know if I can. I'll try to forgive you. But I can't promise anything. I stared at the screen. The words glowing in the dark room. I can't promise anything. He never had. He had just let me believe he had. This was it. This was my proof. This was the truth he had hidden behind 5 years of quiet resentment. My hands were steady now. I pulled out my phone and dialed Jessica. She answered on the second ring. Chloe, is everything okay? I've been so worried. Jessica, I said, my voice low and clear. I need your help. Everything is so much worse than I thought. I explained the plan that was already forming in my mind. The first, crucial steps. She didn't hesitate. My guest room is yours for as long as you need it, she said. Her voice a lifeline in the darkness. Tell me what to do. I was taking a screenshot of the email, saving it to a secure cloud drive. When a floorboard creaked behind me, I slammed the laptop shut, just as Liam appeared in the doorway. A questioning look on his face. What are you doing in the dark? He asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. Doing something secret. My heart leaped into my throat. The screen had gone black just in time. But for a terrifying second, I was sure he had seen it. My heart hammered against my ribs. Affrontique. Trapped bird. I forced a breath into my lungs, which felt suddenly tight and small. Ali. I needed a plausible lie. And I needed it now. Just looking at some old photos, I said, my voice sounding surprisingly steady. Even to my own ears. I swiveled in my chair to face him, forcing a soft, nostalgic smile onto my lips. From our first trip to the coast, remember that little seafood shack with the terrible paintings? He stood in the doorway. His silhouette framed by the light from the hall. He didn't smile back. His eyes scanned the darkened room, lingering on the black, reflective screen of the laptop. For a moment, I was certain he could see the ghost of the email still shimmering on its surface. It's late, he said, his tone flat. You should come to bed. It wasn't an invitation, it was an instruction. I nodded, closing the laptop with a definitive click that seemed to echo in the silence. Just coming. As I walked past him, his hand shot out and rested on my arm. Not a caress, but a restraint. Everything okay with you? Chloe, he asked, his gaze intense. You've been distant since we got back? Just tired. I lied again, the words tasting like poison. The trip took a lot out of me. I'm fine. He held my arm for a second longer, as if weighing my answer, then released me. He bought the lie. I realized, not because it was convincing, but because his own arrogance wouldn't allow him to believe anything else. In his mind, I was the one with the debt to pay. The one who should be grateful. The possibility that I was capable of defiance, of planning an escape, simply didn't exist in his world. The next morning, I told him I had a dentist appointment. It was a lie so mundane, so utterly boring, that it passed without question. But I wasn't driving to a sterile office of drills and fluoride. I was driving downtown, to a high-rise building of glass and steel that reflected the sharp, clear Texas sky. The law office of Miss Abigail Vance was on the 32nd floor. It was quiet, smelled of expensive leather and old paper, and overlooked the entire city. Miss Vance was a woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a handshake that could crush stone. She didn't offer sympathy, she offered strategy. "So," she said after I'd given her the condensed, 5-minute version of the last 5 years, finishing with the wedding and the email. "He's been holding a past mistake over your head as a form of control. And his actions at the wedding were a public demonstration of that control. You now have reason to believe this emotional abuse will continue indefinitely." Hearing it laid out so clinically, so professionally, was a strange kind of validation. It wasn't just me being too sensitive. It was a recognizable pattern of behavior. "Yes," I said. "That's it." "Okay," she said, tapping a pen on a yellow legal pad. "Here's what we do. The first step, always, is to secure your independence. Do you have a separate bank account?" I shook my head. "You will. By the end of today, go to a different bank. Not your shared one. Open an account in your name only. The second step is to document. You have the email, which is excellent. Keep a private journal. Write down every instance of manipulation. Every time he makes a controlling comment, date it. Be specific." I left her office an hour later, my purse feeling heavier with a folder full of paperwork. My fear was still there, a low hum beneath the surface. But for the first time, it was joined by something else, a spark of empowerment. I had a plan. My next stop was a branch of a credit union I'd never used before. The whole process felt clandestine, illicit. My hands were clammy as I filled out the forms. The polite, smiling teller asked me routine questions that felt like an interrogation. When she handed me a temporary debit card, a flimsy piece of plastic with my name on it, I held it like it was a key. In a way, it was. I transferred exactly half of our shared savings into the new account. The number on the receipt made my stomach lurch, but I folded it neatly and tucked it deep into my wallet. It was done. One more bar on the cage had been sawed through. In the days that followed, Liam's suspicion grew. It was a subtle, creeping thing. He started working from home more often, setting up his laptop at the kitchen island where he could see the front door and the hallway to my office. He'd ask casual questions that were anything but, "Who was that on the phone? What's in the package that came today?" He started getting the mail before I could. He framed it all as attentiveness, as a husband taking an interest in our shared life. But I knew what it was. It was surveillance. The house began to feel smaller, the walls closing in. I felt like a spy in my own life, logging into my new bank account on my phone in the bathroom with the door locked, writing in my journal after he'd fallen asleep. The perfect opportunity came a week later. Liam had to fly to Dallas for a 2-day business trip. The relief that washed over me when he told me was so intense I had to turn away so he wouldn't see it on my face. The afternoon his plane took off, Jessica's car pulled into my driveway. We worked with a quiet, frantic efficiency. We didn't pack everything, just the essentials, the irreplaceable things. My personal documents, my grandmother's jewelry, photo albums from before I met Liam, the portfolio of my design work. Every item I placed in a box felt like a piece of myself I was reclaiming. "You're sure about this?" Jessica asked as we taped up the third box. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said, and the truth of it resonated in my bones. We were in my bedroom, sorting through my closet, when my phone, lying on the bed, began to buzz. It was a video call. From Liam. My blood turned to ice. The room was a disaster zone. Half-empty drawers and cardboard boxes everywhere. "Don't answer," Jessica mouthed, her eyes wide. "I have to," I whispered back. "It'll be more suspicious if I don't." My mind raced. In one fluid motion, I grabbed the heavy duvet off the bed and threw it over a stack of boxes, creating a lumpy, makeshift bench. I motioned for Jessica to duck down behind the bed. Then I sat on the edge of the mattress, took a deep breath, and answered the call. Liam's face appeared, grainy from the airport terminal. "Hey," he said. "Just landed. Just wanted to see your face." "Hey. You," I said, forcing a smile so wide it made my cheeks ache. "Glad you landed safely." "What are you up to?" he asked, his eyes scanning the part of the room visible behind me. "Oh, nothing much," I said, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Just finally tackling this disaster of a closet. You know, that big spring clean I've been talking about for months." "Who?" he said. "What's all that rustling noise?" I froze. Jessica was shifting behind the bed. Just moving some shoeboxes around." I improvised. "It's a mess." He seemed to accept it. We talked for another minute. A conversation that felt a year long. Every word a potential landmine. When we finally hung up, I collapsed back on the bed, my entire body shaking. Jessica slowly emerged from her hiding spot. "I think I aged 10 years, she said, letting out a shaky breath. "He is watching you, Chloe, like a hawk." Just as we were loading the last box into her car, another car pulled into the driveway. A pristine white Lexus. Eleanor, Liam's mother. She got out of the car, her face set in a pleasant, unreadable mask. "Chloe, dear," she said, her eyes sweeping over Jessica's car before landing on me. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop by. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." I slammed the trunk of Jessica's car shut. "Eleanor, what a surprise. Jessica was just helping me take some old clothes to Goodwill." "How lovely," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. She turned to me. "You look tired, dear. Strained. You know, marriage is work. It's not always a fairy tale. Sometimes a wife has to be the one to bend, to make things right. You should try a little harder to make him happy." She patted my arm, a gesture that felt more like a warning than a comfort. She stayed for 20 minutes, making small talk that felt like an interrogation, before finally leaving. That night, I stayed at Jessica's. Her small, cozy apartment felt like a sanctuary. I sat on her living room floor and laid out my evidence. The printout of the email, a bank statement from my new account, a list I'd compiled, detailing every time over the past 5 years he had used my mistake to win an argument or make me feel small. It was a pathetic, powerful little pile of proof. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about liberation. The next evening, when Liam got home, I was waiting for him. I had made his favorite meal, roasted chicken and garlic potatoes. I had opened a bottle of good red wine. He walked in, dropped his bags, and smiled when he saw the table. He thought it was a peace offering. He thought I had finally bent, just like his mother had advised. He was relaxed, confident, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to break. He talked about his trip, about the deal he'd closed. I listened, nodded, and asked all the right questions, playing the part of the dutiful wife one last time. After we finished eating, I stood up to clear the plates, but instead of taking them to the kitchen, I set them back down. I sat opposite to him, my hands folded calmly on the table. He looked at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. I took a deep breath, the air feeling cool and steady in my lungs. Liam, I began, my voice even and low. We need to talk about your vows. I paused, letting the words hang in the air between us. And we need to talk about an email you sent me 5 years ago. A flicker of confusion crossed Liam's face, quickly replaced by a familiar, weary annoyance. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest in the defensive posture I'd seen 100 times before. It was the wall he built whenever I tried to touch something real. Are you serious? Chloe, he said, his tone exhausted. I thought we were past this. You got a honeymoon in Cancun. I thought we were good. We were never good, I said, my voice unnervingly calm, because we never actually talked about it. We only ever talked about my feelings, about how I was being too sensitive. I slid a single sheet of paper across the polished oak table. It stopped just beside his wineglass. It was the printout of the email. The warm light of the dining room fell on the stark black text, making it stand out like an indictment. And we never talked about this. He glanced down at the paper. A cursory look at first. Then his eyes snagged. I saw a tiny muscle jump in his jaw as he read the words he himself had written 5 years ago. The smug confidence on his face began to crack. You never forgave me. Did you? I said. Not as a question, but as a statement of fact. For 5 years, you haven't been building a future with me. You've been serving a sentence. A quiet, lifelong sentence where you got to be the judge, the jury, and the warden. Liam let out a short, scoffing laugh. But it was hollow and brittle. That's ridiculous. You're taking one old email from years ago and turning it into some kind of melodrama. You're being sensitive. Chloe. You always are. It was his go-to play. The gaslight. Turn it back on me. On my instability. But it didn't work anymore. The armor of guilt I had worn for half a decade had crumbled to dust. No, I said, shaking my head slowly. Not this time. This time, I have receipts. I pulled another sheet from my small, neat pile. It was the list I had compiled. June 15th. 2 years ago, when we argued about finances, you said, at least I don't go sleep with someone else when things get hard. September 7th of last year, when I got a promotion and wanted to celebrate, you said, fine. As long as it doesn't go to your head and make you start looking for attention elsewhere. Last month, on our honeymoon, you screamed at me that I had no right to demand promises after what I did. I set the paper down. And then, there were the vows. I said, my voice hardening. Each word a stone being laid carefully in place. That wasn't forgetfulness. Liam. And it wasn't because you're not good with words. It was the finale. A public performance. You wanted our 200 guests. My family. My friends. Everyone. To see that I wasn't worthy of your words. That I was lucky to be there at all. You turned what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life into a spectacle of my humiliation. His mask shattered completely. The confidence vanished. The annoyance disappeared. And all that was left was a raw, ugly rage. He slammed his hand on the table, the plates and glasses rattling violently. So what, he roared, the sound echoing in the quiet house. So what if I did? You cheated on me. You broke the only thing that mattered. Did you think it would be easy? Did you think you could just cry and say you were sorry and everything would just go back to the way it was? You humiliated me. Chloe. I made a mistake, I countered, my voice still holding its cold calm. A terrible mistake that I will regret for the rest of my life. I told you the truth. And I have spent every single day for the last 5 years trying to atone for it. But you didn't give me that chance. You chose to lie. You said you forgave me, when all you were really doing was feeding your resentment, watering it every day until it grew into this poisonous, ugly thing that choked everything we had. I stood up, feeling a strength rise from the floor, through my legs, and settle in my core. No, it wasn't easy. And I should have left a long time ago. The moment I realized your forgiveness was just another kind of cage, my mistake was real. Liam, but it does not give you the right to make my life a prison. I married you. I stood up in front of everyone and said my vows. Because I actually hoped for a new beginning. I looked him straight in the eye. His face now a mask of shock and disbelief. But the only vow that matters tonight is the one I'm making to myself. Silence descended. I could hear my own heartbeat. A steady, powerful rhythm. I wasn't shaking anymore. I'm divorcing you, I said. The 3 words hung in the air. I felt a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying. 5 years of guilt, of shame, of the constant, gnawing fear that I wasn't good enough, that I had to pay for my sins forever lift from my shoulders. It was all gone. All that was left was a clean, startling lightness. I didn't wait for him to respond. There was nothing left to say. I turned my back, walked out of the dining room, through the living room filled with furniture we had chosen together, and toward the front door. I could feel his eyes on my back. Chloe. Wait. His voice came from behind me, a note of panic finally creeping in. You can't just our house. The finances. I paused at the door but did not turn around. My lawyer will be in contact, I said. And then I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. I pulled it shut behind me, the click of the latch sounding like the most profound kind of freedom. Jessica's car was parked at the end of the block, just as we'd planned. I got in, started the engine, and drove. I didn't look at the house in my rearview mirror. My phone began to ring in my purse, the screen lighting up with his name. It rang again, and again, and again. Desperate. Frantic sound in the darkness. I didn't answer. I just drove. The quiet hum of the engine, the only sound breaking the silence, carrying me away from my prison and toward a future I couldn't see, but one that was entirely my own. A few months passed. Autumn in Austin brought a crisp, clean air that washed away the oppressive summer heat and the weight of the past. I found a small apartment in the southern part of the city with a balcony that overlooked a canopy of live oak trees. It wasn't as big as the house, but everything in it was mine. One afternoon, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. It was the final divorce decree, signed and sealed. I was no longer Mrs. Miller. I was Chloe Anderson again. I held the papers in my hand. Feeling their finality, there were no tears, no triumphant celebration, just a deep, quiet sense of peace. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto the balcony. The city spread out before me. A glittering carpet of lights under a deep violet sky. A gentle breeze stirred my hair. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. For the first time in a very long time, the air filled my lungs easily, with no weight, no tightness in my chest. The narrator's voice in my own head, the one telling my story, was clear and strong. I had spent so much time writing vows for a man who didn't deserve them. I had believed that beautiful words could fix broken things. But in the end, I realized the most important words aren't the ones you promise to someone else, but the ones you promise to yourself. My vow now was simple: to never again let someone turn love into a punishment, to never let a mistake from the past define the value of my future, and to always choose myself. I opened my eyes and smiled at the city, a real, unforced smile that came from a long-forgotten place of peace. The old chapter was over, and I was ready to start writing the new one.